This is the School Success Podcast, a podcast for school leaders to learn from other school leaders what's working and what's not, and to get inspiration and encouragement, as well as strategies to grow school enrollment, connect with families, retain teachers, recruit teachers, and everything in between. You guys are heroes, and I cannot thank you enough for pouring into this next generation that's coming behind us. My goal is you will take at least one thing away from every episode that you can take back to your school to make it better than it is right now. Please enjoy the School Success Podcast. Hey, School Success Makers. Welcome to another edition of the School Success Podcast. I'm your host, Mitchell Slater. I'm joined by a new friend out of the island of Maui, Hawaii, Eric Dustman, who is the head of school at Montessori School of Maui. I got connected with him online, and of course, my wife and I, those that have been listening for a while, we do love the Montessori lifestyle, the way of education. And so I was like, well, I got to have this guy on because not only is he doing Montessori, but he's also in Hawaii. And who doesn't want to hear about Hawaii, talk to somebody in Hawaii? So I invited him on, and obviously he is here today, but I won't steal any of his thunder. I'll pass it off to him to introduce himself. So Eric, welcome to the podcast, sir.
Thank you, Mitchell. Yeah, my name is Eric Dustman. I'm the head of the Montessori School of Maui. I've been here for about 6 years, since 2017. I actually moved my family from China, where we were from 2015 to 17. I was the principal of an international baccalaureate school that had a Montessori toddler and a couple early childhood classrooms. And before I left, after the 2 years, we maintained the toddler, added a primary, and had moved into the lower elementary. So lots of experience previous to that. Worked in public Montessori schools, actually, in addition to other independent ones. And so I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks so much for having me and let me share some insights with your listeners.
Love it. Well, I know I told you before we started recording, I've never been to Hawaii, but of course want to go to Hawaii. So I always like to ask every guest, if I was to visit you, what would you say, Mitchell, you got to do this when you come to Maui, like if to have the full experience?
Well, I think you need to go first and grab some poke and take it to the beach. And if you get a little sand in there, that's all right. Just soak it up and enjoy it.
Okay. Is there a poke place you like, you got to go to this poke place, not this poke place?
You know, Tamara's is a place that has some very, very good. I'm sure others that have been here much longer than I have might suggest other places or some hidden gems, but I'm unaware of those and generally stick to the Tamara's.
Perfect. I got it saved, and I can always go back and listen to the podcast to remember when I'm over there visiting. So you mentioned already stuff in your intro that I'd love to even just dive into before we get into kind of the main three sections we go into. You mentioned living in China and heading up a school over there. I would love to hear like what the Montessori, how popular is it over there? Like how did that come to be and get all the way over there?
Yeah, so I think last I knew or was a part of the conversation, there were probably thousands of Montessori schools in China. I actually had served on the American Montessori Society's Accreditation Commission for 9 years. And 𝐄𝐫𝐢 𝐿 International School was the first school in mainland China that was seeking accreditation through AMS. And kind of jokingly, at the time I was the chair of the commission, and I jokingly said, well, I'm the chair, I should probably go. I said that to my colleague, Sarah Wilson, who worked at AMS at the time as the director of accreditation. And I said, and you're the director of accreditation, you should probably go. Her boss said, yeah, Eric should go, but no, you shouldn't. And so I took a new commissioner with me. And so I essentially went to look at the school's program and to ensure that they met authentic Montessori standards. And I hit it off with the director of the Baishan Education Group, Chris Bakari. And he said, you know, if you ever want to come to China, just say the word. And, so that was probably, I think, 2013. And, I returned to the States, and my wife and I had previously talked about moving overseas. Of the four of us, so my sister, my wife's brother, and my wife, I was the only one to only ever live in the state of Ohio in the United States. And while we had previously thought about moving to China, and I'd done some interviewing with some Montessori schools in Shanghai, actually, we were concerned about air quality because we had very young kids at that point. And I guess shamefully, by the time they turned 10, 12, and 14, we didn't really care. And we decided air quality good or not, we're going to move them to Qingdao, China. So we did, and it was awesome. It was a great experience. Small school, about 165 kids, toddler through grade 12, so not big, but it had only been in operation for, by the time I got there, about 5 or 6 years. And it was a terrific experience. But we sought something new when our oldest was heading into her junior year of high school, because with re-enrollment, she was slated to be the one of 3 girls in her entire junior class. And so, of course, we departed and headed here to Maui, and the school did well to recruit and had a pretty good junior class. So she wouldn't have necessarily missed out. I'd probably still be there if I could. I really loved it, but Maui has certainly served us well, and I'd say that same thing about education in general, with regards to me. So
Very cool. Oh man, I never thought I'd get this piece of the interview of the China side of it. I think that's really cool. Thousands of Montessori schools and them diving into it, even having through 12th grade. I know that's very, at least here, I know it's not as common to have one all the way through high school, but is that just how they all do it over there?
Well, no, maybe I misspoke. I mean, it certainly wasn't through high school. So the school where I was, we ultimately had full programs through primary, so through 3 to 6.
Okay.
And we were moving into elementary. I think I could probably say with some pretty good confidence that most schools within China were primary programs. I believe the Montessori School of Shanghai, though I probably shouldn't speak of it because I don't know for sure, I believe that is strictly a primary program. So, I mean, obviously most of them go unregulated. There are a number of people that I'm familiar with from the American Montessori Society, not working for AMS, but formerly with AMS schools, that do some consulting and things like that in China. So, the authenticity that I anticipate is occurring in China is probably better than it was a decade ago. But I know that as you may or may not know, Montessori is not a trademark name, and anybody can use it. And so I think in that regard, there were, of those thousands of schools, I'm not quite sure how many I would identify as authentic or really following the pedagogy or Maria Montessori's. All schools, I suppose, struggle with that no matter what. I mean, from being on the American Montessori Society's commission, at times schools struggle with enrollment, schools struggle with staffing. And all of those things impact a school that's looking to be certified as an authentic Montessori school, whether or not through AMI or AMS. I think in some ways the cyclical life of schools, sometimes you have really great times and other times you're wrought with challenges.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I love your story already, how you got to where you are. So I would love to obviously dive into the school you're at now. So before we kind of dive into those 3 questions, give us kind of a background on the school itself, like the size, students, how long they've been around, all of that.
Yeah. Okay. So the Montessori School in Maui began in 1978 in a Quonset hut, probably about 5 miles from our current campus. So a Quonset hut is almost like an airplane hangar. So there were 8 students. So sounds like a pretty tip of Montessori start in many respects, certainly for schools in the 70s. But pre-pandemic had about 300 students on campus. With the pandemic and the school year beginning 2021, we lost 30% of our enrollment and went to 210. We've slowly recovered and been pretty mindful in doing so. We're still down 1 primary classroom. So we typically have, but we're currently only operating with 4 and anticipate operating with 4 next year. So we're back to almost 250 students, toddler through grade 8. Okay. So yeah, it's a lovely school. Beautiful campus, about 9 3/4 acres. We have every classroom basically is kind of its own, connected only by lanais and porches, and doors swing wide in the morning, and classrooms are basically in out. And so yeah, it's a super nice place to be.
Love it. Oh, it sounds beautiful. Well, obviously with the school been around that long, you already kind of mentioned maybe even one challenge, obviously after the pandemic. Of course, schools were hit pretty hard after that. What are some of the challenges that you guys are currently up against, or maybe have even overcome, but how you overcame those challenges you guys have had?
I love your suggestion that we've overcome our challenges. Our biggest challenge that we have yet to overcome is staffing. So, we're the furthest point from, I think, anywhere when you look at us geographically. There is, as far as I know, one training program at Chaminade University on Oahu, and it's a primary training facility. We've have had at least one teacher work with us from that training facility, but obviously there's one training facility within our general proximity, and it's only 3 to 6. And so we have, toddler, we have lower elementary, upper elementary, middle school. And so our ability to really, I suppose, attract and find people, it has been a challenge. As you've alluded, the thought of Hawaii sounds really great. And it is really great, but it's very expensive to live here. I think our salary scale is very good. People, get credit for anything. They get credit for, obviously their degrees on top of their base. They get credit for work as assistants, work as teachers, whether they were previously in Montessori schools or non-Montessori schools, and they get credit for other things. So, their salaries add up pretty quickly, and, I think are nice. As a good friend of mine says, nobody got into education to retire early and become rich, but you obviously have to live. And so we very much appreciate that. I do think we take really great care of our staff. As far as teachers and credentialed guides go, you have to have a credential to work within the classroom that you're working in. And so we've had some pretty good luck in that regard. Our teachers come and they do stay. We've primarily had challenges with assistants who work alongside teachers and develop good relationships and strong relationships. And when they depart, sometimes quickly, that creates, here it's April, and just 2 weeks ago, we finally managed to hire an additional assistant that essentially acts as a floater that fills gaps when we can't find substitutes, because we have probably 3 substitutes that are pretty reliable, pretty available, and willing to work for us when we need them. But otherwise, that's a challenge. And to speak further about it, our middle school teacher, lead guide, left in December, have been unable to fill that position because, as I believe, right or wrong, most people are working. And if they're not working, you might want to really look closely at them. But ultimately, the end of the story, make it short and quick, is that I'm the lead guide in middle school. So, so I'm in middle school every day working alongside our math and science resource teacher there to support our 21 middle school. And, meanwhile, I'm still the head of school. And with the pandemic, we lost a number of administrators and have not yet rehired all of those folks. So for about the last 2.5 years, I've also been the director of development. Okay. And raising money can be a challenge, but I'm pleased to say that we have raised more money this year than we have raised in previous years. And I chalk it up as dumb luck. Not sure. I don't think I did anything special. Okay. But we're doing okay.
Okay. Well, to dive into that one a little bit more with the teachers, do you typically, or the guides, if you had to hire within just the one island, the state, or do you have to reach over onto the mainland to grab people? Like, where have they historically had to come from for you guys?
Yeah, we typically bring them from the mainland. Okay. We typically bring them from the mainland. So the last couple of people that I brought an upper elementary teacher from Arizona. I brought a lower elementary teacher from Boise, Idaho. I have somebody on staff who is from the mainland, but actually moved here from Australia. Signed on, is a Montessori credentialed teacher, but signed on as an assistant. But the teacher that she was going to work for ended up moving to the mainland with her family. And so she took over. I actually had someone, here's a story and a challenge that I would anticipate most listeners probably haven't dealt with, but I had a teacher that worked with us for 2.5 years. She was from Chaminade, getting her primary credential. So worked under one of our veteran teachers, so I'll say well-trained, and was really just a dynamo. I moved her into a primary classroom as a lead teacher, but she's from Canada and had been working on a student visa. We looked to change that to an H-1B and worked for almost a year to do so, and she was denied. And so we started the school year, of course, in August. She was here. It's great. Lots of energy. Felt really good. And October 2nd, she left the country and remains in Canada. And so, so I actually found a teacher from Atlanta who was here on island, her friend's dogs. And she called and said, "Hey, I'm a Montessori teacher from Atlanta. I'm not working this year, but I'd love to tour your school as I'm on island." And in the end, long story short, I hired her and she said, "This is great. I have nowhere to live and I have no car." So she actually rents a room from me.
Wow.
Which is odd. But she's great. She's super clean. That's a plus. But yeah, so she is here. She rents a car from me as well, and it's working out. But I mean, so I mean, that seems ridiculous as I repeated, and it is arguably ridiculous, But it's one of those things. I can be a middle school guide. I can't be a primary guide. I have a 6 to 12 credential, so I did my student teaching in lower elementary, and I led a classroom in upper elementary. And so older kids is typically where I'm best.
Man, I understand completely. I mean, we've gone to observe at my son's school and like seeing like the difference in age classrooms. I'm like, man, that's like sometimes hurting cats if you feel like you just like is just constant.
Yeah.
But I feel you. I understand. So, well, I love those challenges because I think you guys are, from what I've heard and from what I've talked to you guys are cut out to grow and to fill those roles. And I think as time goes on, it sounds like it's recovering nicely. And it just sounds like, do you need those teachers to be able to get back to capacity of where you were at before? Is that what's keeping you from being at capacity? Is you need the guides to be able to grow the school back to where it was pre-pandemic?
Well, yeah. I mean, let me say one more thing about my crazy story I just shared. I think, and probably many heads, certainly through the pandemic, and even as we emerge from, because we could talk certainly about how kids are different. I think kids are different. Young kids are different from a social and an emotional standpoint, whether it's from 6 foot distancing, masks, not being in school, whatnot. I mean, I think there's some challenges we're dealing with there, but certainly through the pandemic, I think most heads and certainly staff at schools did what they had to do to ensure the health, safety, and well-being of their students, while also ensuring that they educated them to the best of their ability. And I mean, so that's kind of what we still do. So I have a teacher living with me that I don't know if that's ever happened. Certainly, I suppose crazier stuff has. But you just do what you have to do.
Yeah.
I think I'd probably rather go meet with donors and raise more money and do some other things such as support my staff by being in their spaces and offering them guidance. But instead, I'm in middle school because I have to be right now. So, that's that story. But, yes, I mean, I need those teachers. I mean, we do have a 5th classroom that is a modular. It was placed about 20 years ago. It was to be temporary. It's been everything from a primary classroom to an upper elementary classroom. In the pandemic, when we lost 30% of our students, we closed that class. Had plans a couple years ago to replace it, to remove it, and to build a permanent structure so that it was, similar to the other primary classrooms on campus, like other people have probably faced. It went from a price tag of about $650,000 to 1.4. So we put that on hold, but we just learned, last week that our building permits were approved. So we proceeded with the process, but building permits are approved for everything. We're throwing the project back out to bid, and come June 24th, the building will be removed from campus. So we finally got that going. And so once we add that classroom, we'll have a capacity of having 118 primary students ages 3 to 6 on campus. It'll raise our enrollment to about 275. And I think that's a good number. I think that's a good number for us. It doesn't necessarily overtax our faculty in lower elementary and upper elementary, because in those spaces, a couple of years ago, we added some square footage. And so one of our lower elementary classrooms can hold 35 students. And with that, the model we went with previously, when we did do that, to simply have space for the students we were able to retain, we had 2 guides and an assistant within that classroom. Our upper elementary has an additional 600 square feet as well and can hold up to 57 students. In that scenario, we'll generally go with 3 guides and 1 or 2 assistants. But, that when you add additional kids, that sometimes overtaxes, and then you don't deliver the best program or the program that you're hoping to do. So I think we have to, as we have emerged and looked to increase our numbers again from 210 to 250, we've been really mindful. We continue our assessment process to ensure the readiness of students who we invite to join us. We look for balance within the classrooms from a age, gender, level, challenge, whatnot. And so, I think we've been careful to not assume that we can readily go back to exactly how we used to be.
Perfect. Well, I think that was the perfect segue into the next section of what's going good. I've even hinted at some. What do you feel like as your school give you a chance to brag about the school? What's going really, really good that you love to share with people that are listening?
I think one thing that people really enjoy is the care that people have for one another. We do have a strong community. I anticipate, most people would probably argue the same. Our administrative team, as I kind of said a little bit ago, when we hit the pandemic, we used to function with 8 administrators. We're down to 5. Haven't recovered and brought those new folks in. But, while we within the administration work to take care of one another, I think people within my administrative team that look to support teachers and staff honestly haven't skipped a beat. So over the 2 years where we managed the pandemic, we were on school grounds and on campus every single day. We rarely shut classrooms. So essentially, what that means, like perhaps most places, we were only away from campus in March of 20. Right? So those 8 weeks. So from our spring break on. But, rather than host in-services or professional development opportunities on campus on those days that typically slated within a school calendar, obviously people still had opportunities to do things like that. But we really wanted to ensure that we attended to our staff and their social and emotional health. And so we simply provided them days where we offered massages, we offered opportunities to salsa dance, we offered yoga, we offered sound bathing, and we always feed people. And, provided them an opportunity to take a breath, to work within their classrooms, and ultimately do some self-care. I have a good buddy of mine that is a head in Cincinnati, Ohio, at the school where I was prior to China. He and I were just at the American Montessori Society conference in April in Boston and did a presentation on burnout. And we were very honest with people that we weren't standing there being experts to talk them out of feeling burnt or spent or however they wanted to define it. We're just like them. We're in schools as well. But what we wanted to encourage them to do was that self-care. All of those things that we as educators and probably as adults know we should do to care for ourselves, we already know. So we weren't necessarily telling them anything they didn't, but we were encouraging them to do it because that's the problem. We all know what we should do to care for ourselves so that we can be there for our spouses, be there for our kids, be there for the students that are in our classrooms, but we just don't because we don't take the time and we constantly rush. And so, I can't say enough good things about, my administrative team, my staff. They work really hard. We've expanded professional development opportunities to them. Everybody gets money every year, but because we're so far away from, we on a cyclical basis give about $3,000 to each teacher in a cycle so that they are able to then go to the Montessori Congress, which I think is in Bangkok, Thailand this year. When I first arrived, about 4 teachers went to Prague for the Montessori conference. That's the conference hosted by AMI. They can, if they want, they can go to the AMS conference, or they can go to a conference on meditation, something that's that rejuvenates them and helps them, I suppose, feel whole again, so that they can come back in and do their best work. And that's my goal as an administrator, to support, my staff to do their work best, to provide them with the tools they need to be successful, because that's the only way I'm successful, is if they're successful themselves. And yeah, that's it. I'll stop there. I could go on, but
I love
anyway.
it. No, this is good. Well, you've shared some good stuff, obviously, about the challenges, what's going really good. I love that you guys are giving them the financial ability to go work on themselves or go to a conference. I haven't heard of that, I don't think, before yet. I know obviously finances come into play, of course, with a lot of the schools being like, oh, wish we had more funding for this, and this. That's a huge one. Kind of a flip question, I guess. If there was so school listening going, man, I love that. I'd love to be able to do that. Is there any type of like tip of advice on that section of like, hey, a way to give a teacher a way to go to a conference or learn some more things? Anything that you would like share on that side that they maybe haven't thought of?
Get a good CFO on your staff.
There you go.
We have done, the CFO that we are currently working with is just dynamite. She's amazing. She's been here. She was actually the head of the search committee prior to my arrival. So I'm not saying that's why she's great, although, she did lead the school in, I suppose, a good direction, arguably. But she was, former vice president of the board. She stepped into the steering committee chair for the search. She was head of PTO at one point. She has a finance background. She came in and essentially did some consulting alongside our former CFO who retired about 3 years ago. So that was kind of that transition. But we've always budgeted, with an eye for, hey, let's look to enroll this many students, but let's look to stay within a budget like this one. So we might look to enroll 250 students, and while we could budget to the max and zero out, we look to budget 246 kids or 245 kids. And so we essentially give ourselves that cushion. And so I think over the years, then that compounds and our investments are really good. And we have a mortgage like most other schools. We do annual fund like most other schools. I'd love to not, I've been at schools where I sought donations from parents to send all of our staff to the American Montessori Society's 100th anniversary conference in New York City. We did that. But, I think you create systems and you set aside monies and you do what you're capable of. Somebody on the mainland to send somebody to a conference, you could look to set aside $750 to $1,000. We do 3 because, of course, you gotta fly there. So you got a 5-hour flight just to even get to the mainland. And if the conference is in Boston, you got another 5 hours or 6 to fly versus driving from Cincinnati to Louisville, whatever. So, but yeah, good CFOs are really awesome. And they make a head's job really good and get a great board. I think that's another thing that has been really good for this school. The board of trustees that I work with, obviously it shifted over the 6 years I've been here because obviously like other boards, it's self-perpetuating, it's cyclical, but they trust and they believe in what I do and the work that I do with my team. And I seek their support, I seek their advice. I'm very transparent and we have a good relationship, and they do their work in committees. And so, that's where the decision making happens. And so when you get into a board meeting, you can talk about what's happening and people can feel assured that good thought has been put into things and there's no second guessing. And that enables certainly me as the head of school to not feel micromanaged and to feel trusted and at liberty to do what I think is right from an educational standpoint. And then I have my CFO and my director of admissions and my director of HR that they know those duties, they know those responsibilities, and they fulfill them with honesty and integrity. And that's really helpful.
Yeah, love it. Well, as we kind of wrap up the podcast, I always end with asking somebody for a piece of advice that they would share with the other school leaders that are listening. So if you had one to share, what would it be, Eric?
I think I'd go back to, I didn't even talk about it, but I think be humble. I've done this. Next year will be my 25th year in a leadership capacity within schools, my 30th within education. I don't know everything, but I certainly interested in developing relationships and creating connections with people that I work with that supports them to be their best. I alluded to it earlier. If I can support my teachers in providing them with the tools that they feel they need to do their best work, then they can be successful because their students are successful. And obviously, if students are successful, then we all are. That's our purpose. So,
love it. Eric, thank you for taking time to hop on. I know it's early. I think we have a 5 or 6 hour difference from me on the East Coast, you in Hawaii. So you woke up early for this one. So thank you for taking time out of your day. I obviously loved our chat, love Montessori, so I appreciate you sharing your expertise, and thank you for pouring into all those generations of kids. Looking forward to you doing that even more so in the future generations of those kids. So thank you again, and hopefully when I come visit, we'll meet up when I'm in one day in Maui, all right?
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure. Thanks, Mitchell.
Well, another huge shout out and a thank you to Eric for taking time and being on the podcast today. I love what he's doing over there in Maui, and I appreciate him waking up early. I think it was like 6 or something in the morning. He had to wake up for us to do that podcast recording. Big time difference. I think it's 6 hours, so it was quite the difference from Eastern Standard Time. But Eric, man, thank you so much, and wishing you and your school nothing but the best as you guys recover from COVID and continue to grow. And I'm hoping you're able to recruit all those teachers and guides that you guys need for the future years to come. Well, guys, I'm hoping, as always, you're able to learn at least one thing from today's episode that you can take back to your school to make it better than it is right now. Maybe it was on the side that Eric mentioned about giving your teachers the ability to maybe go to some conferences or have some finances that they can use every year to pour into themselves. And maybe if that's not an option, you're able to grab something else from the interview today. A lot of really good nuggets that I'm hoping you're able to take and use. And if you're looking for some community, maybe you feel maybe a little bit burnt out like Eric had mentioned, and you need just some community of other school leaders around you, I'd love you to join our private Facebook community. It is just for school leaders, called School Success Makers, because that's what you guys are. You guys are school success makers. And I'd love for you to join our private Facebook group just for school leaders. I'm personally in there. I'd love to see you in there as well. And of course, if you guys are struggling with enrollment, trying to figure out ways to grow your schools, preparing for this fall semester that is going to be here before we know it, I want you to check out our resources on schoolsuccessmakers.com. That's schoolsuccessmakers.com. We got our newsletter that we're launching, the School Success Report Card. We're going to have courses we're going to have on there eventually, some blogs. We're going to have a ton of resources for you educators because you guys are doing such an amazing job, and we want to support you any way that we can. And of course, if you need help growing your enrollment, we can help you do that as well. We will be here next week with another amazing guest as usual on the School Success Podcast. We'll see you then.